Chapter 2 Mythical Incidents X The Lizard Hen Yokuts Kroeber, University of California Publications in American Archaeology and Ethnology. 4. No. It was Coyote who brought it about that people die. He made it thus because our hands are not closed like his. He wanted our hands to be like his, but a lizard said to him, "No, they must have my hand." He had fingers and Coyote had only a FST. So now we have an open hand with fingers. But then Coyote said, "Well, then they will have to die." 11. Determination of the Seasons Tahltan. Teit. Journal of American Folklore, 32. Once Porcupine and Beaver quarreled about the seasons. Porcupine wanted winter months. He held up one hand and showed his fingers. He said, "Let the winter months be the same in number as the fingers on my hand." Beaver said, "No," and held up his tail, which had many cracks or scratches on it. He said, "Let the winter months be the same in number as the scratches on my tail." Now they quarreled and argued. Porcupine got angry and bit off his thumb. Then, holding up his hand with the 4 fingers, he said emphatically, "There must be only 4 winter months." Beaver became a little afraid and gave in. For this reason, porcupines have 4 claws on each foot now. Since Porcupine won, the winter remained 4 months in length, until later Raven changed it a little. Raven considered what Porcupine and Beaver had said about the winters, and decided that Porcupine had done right. He said, "Porcupine was right. If the winters were made too long, people could not live. Henceforth the winters will be about this length, but they will be variable. I will tell you of the xxxii month, when people will meet together and talk. At that time of the year, people will ask questions or propound riddles, and others will answer. If the riddle is answered correctly, then the person who propounded it must answer, 'Fool hen.'" Raven chose this word because the fool hen has a shorter beak than any other game bird. If people guess riddles correctly at this time of year, then the winter will be short and the spring come early. 12. Marriage of the North and the South. Cherokee. Mooney, Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology, 19. No. The North went traveling, and after going far and meeting many different tribes, he finally fell in love with the daughter of the South and wanted to marry her. The girl was willing, but her parents objected and said, "Ever since you came, the weather has been cold, and if you stay here we may all freeze to death." The North pleaded hard and said that if they would let him have their daughter, he would take her back to his own country. So at last they consented. They were married, and he took his bride to his own country. And when she arrived there, she found the people all living in ice houses. The next day, when the sun rose, the houses began to leak, and as it climbed higher, they began to melt, and it grew warmer and warmer, until finally the people came to the young husband and told him he must send his wife home again, or the weather would get so warm that the whole settlement would be melted. He loved his wife and so held out as long as he could, but as the sun grew hotter, the people were more urgent, and at last he had to send her home to her parents. The people said that as she had been born in the South and nourished all her life upon food that grew in the same climate, her whole nature was warm and unfit for the North. 13. Determination of Night and Day Iroquois. Smith, Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology, 2. Once upon a time, the porcupine was appointed to be the leader of all the animals. Soon after his appointment, he called them and presented the question, "Shall we have night and darkness, or daylight with its sunshine?" This was a very important question, and a violent discussion arose, some wishing for daylight and the sun to rule, and others for continual night. The chipmunk wished for night and day, weeks and months, and night to be separate from the day. So he began singing, "The light will come, we must have light," which he continued to repeat. Meanwhile the bear began singing, "Night is best, we must have darkness." While the chipmunk was singing, the day began to dawn. Then the other party saw that the chipmunk was prevailing, and were very angry. And their leader, the bear, pursued the chipmunk, who managed to escape uninjured, the huge paw of the bear simply grazing his back as he entered his hole in a hollow tree, leaving its black imprint, which the chipmunk has ever since retained. But night and day have ever continued to alternate. 14. The Theft of Fire Maidu. Dixon, Bulletin of the American Museum of Natural History, 17. No. At one time the people had found FRE and were going to use it, but Thunder wanted to take it away from them, as he desired to be the only one who should have FRE. He thought that if he could do this, he would be able to kill all the people. After a time he succeeded, and carried the FRE home with him, far to the south. He put Waswisim, a small bird, to guard the FRE, and see that no one should steal it. Thunder thought that people would die after he had stolen their FRE, for they would not be able to cook their food. But the people managed to get along. They ate most of their food raw, and sometimes got Toyscom, another small bird, to look for a long time at a piece of meat. And as he had a red eye, this after a long time would cook the meat almost as well as a FRE. Only the chiefs had their food cooked in this way. All the people lived together in a big sweat house. The house was as big as a mountain. Among the people was Lizard and his brother. And they were always the FRSD in the morning to go outside and sun themselves on the roof of the sweat house. One morning as they lay there sunning themselves, they looked west, toward the coast range, and saw smoke. They called to all the other people, saying that they had seen smoke far away to the west. The people, however, would not believe them, and Coyote came out and threw a lot of dirt and dust over the two. One of the people did not like this. He said to Coyote, "Why do you trouble people? Why don't you let others alone? Why don't you behave? You're always the FRSD to start a quarrel. You always want to kill people without any reason." Then the other people felt sorry. They asked the two lizards about what they had seen and asked them to point out the smoke. The lizards did so, and all could see the thin column rising up far to the west. One person said, "How shall we get that FRE back? How shall we get it away from Thunder? He's a bad man. I don't know whether we had better try to get it or not." Then the chief said, "The best one among you had better try to get it. Even if Thunder is a bad man, we must try to get the FRE. When we get there, I don't know how we shall get in, but the one who is the best, who thinks he can get in, let him try." Mouse, Deer, Dog, and Coyote were the ones who were to try, but all the other people went too. They took a few with them, for they meant to put the FRE in it. They traveled a long time, and finally reached the place where the FRE was. They were within a little distance of Thunder's house, when they all stopped to see what they would do. Waswisim, who was supposed to guard the FRE in the house, began to sing, "I am the man who never sleeps. I am the man who never sleeps." Thunder had paid him for his work in beads, and he wore them about his neck and around his waist. He sat on the top of the sweat house, by the smoke hole. After a while, Mouse was sent up to try and see if he could get in. He crept up slowly till he got close to Waswisim, and then saw that his eyes were shut. He was asleep, in spite of the song that he sang. When Mouse saw that the watcher was asleep, he crawled to the opening and went in. Thunder had several daughters, and they were lying there asleep. Mouse stole up quietly and untied the waist string of each one's apron, so that should the alarm be given, and they jump up, these aprons or skirts would fall off, and they would have to stop to FX them. This done, Mouse took the fiat, flooded it with FRE, it then crept out, and rejoined the other people who were waiting outside. Some of the FRE was taken out and put in the dog's ear, the remainder in the fiat being given to the swiftest runner to carry. Deer, however, took a little, which he carried on the hock of his leg, where today there is a reddish spot. For a while all went well, but when they were about halfway back, Thunder woke up, suspected that something was wrong, and asked, "What is the matter with my FRE?" Then he jumped up with a roar of thunder, and his daughters were thus awakened, and also jumped up, but their aprons fell off as they did so, and they had to sit down again to put them on. After they were all ready, they went out with Thunder to give chase. They carried with them a heavy wind and a great rain and a hailstorm, so that they might put out any FRE the people had. Thunder and his daughters hurried along, and soon caught up with the fugitives, and were about to catch them, when Skunk shot at Thunder and killed him. Then Skunk called out, "After this you must never try to follow and kill people. You must stay up in the sky and be the Thunder. That is what you will be." The daughters of Thunder did not follow any farther. So the people went on safely and got home with their FRE, and people have had it ever since. xxxii this son snorted. Minomini, Hoffman, report of the Bureau of American Ethnology. 14. One day while two elder brothers were out hunting in the forest, the youngest went away to hide himself and to mourn because he was not permitted to join them. He had with him his bow and arrows and his beaver skin robe. But when the sun rose high in the sky, he became tired and laid himself down to weep, covering himself entirely with his robe to keep out the sun. When the sun was directly overhead and saw the boy, it sent down a ray which burned spots upon the robe and made it shrink until it exposed the boy. Then the sun smiled, while the boy wept more violently than before. He felt that he had been cruelly treated both by his brothers and now by the sun. He said to the sun, "You have treated me cruelly and burned my robe when I did not deserve it. Why do you punish me like this?" The sun merely continued to smile, but said nothing. The boy then gathered up his bow and arrows, and taking his burnt robe, returned to the wigwam, where he lay down in a dark corner and again wept. His sister was outside of the wigwam when he returned, so she was not aware of his presence when she re-entered to attend to her work. Presently, she heard someone crying, and going over to the place whence the sound came, she found that it was her youngest brother who was in distress. She said to him, "My brother, why are you weeping?" To which he replied, "Look at me. I am sad because the sun burned my beaver skin robe. I have been cruelly treated this day." Then he turned his face away and continued to weep. Even in his sleep he sobbed because of his distress. When he awoke, he said to his sister, "My sister, give me a thread. I wish to use it." She handed him a sinew thread, but he said to her, "No, that is not what I want. I want a hair thread." She said to him, "Take this. This is strong." "No," he replied, "that is not the kind of a thread I want. I want a hair thread." She then understood his meaning, and plucking a single hair from her person handed it to him. When he said, "That is what I want," and taking it at both ends he began to pull it gently, smoothing it out as it continued to lengthen until it reached from the tips of the fingers of one hand to the ends of the fingers of the other. Then he started out to where the sun's path touched the earth. When he reached the place where the sun was when it burned his robe, the little boy made a noose and stretched it across the path. And when the sun came to that point, the noose caught him around the neck and began to choke him until he almost lost his breath. It became dark, and the sun called out to the Manitos, "Help me, my brothers, and cut this string before it kills me." The Manitos came, but the thread had so cut into the flesh of the sun's neck that they could not sever it. When all but one had given up, the sun called to the mouse to try to cut the string. The mouse came up and gnawed at the string, but it was difficult work because the string was hot and deeply embedded in the sun's neck. After working at the string a good while, however, the mouse succeeded in cutting it when the sun breathed again and the darkness disappeared. If the mouse had not succeeded, the sun would have died. Then the boy said to the sun, "For your cruelty, I have punished you. Now you may go." The boy then returned to his sister, satisfied with what he had done. 16. The man who acted as the sun Bella Coola. Boas, Jessup North Pacific Expedition. Once upon a time there lived a woman asterisk some distance up Bella Coola River. She refused the offer of marriage from the young men of the tribe because she desired to marry the sun. She left her village and went to seek the sun. Finally, she reached his house and married the sun. After she had been there one day, she had a child. He grew very quickly, and on the second day of his life, he was able to walk and to talk. After a short time, he said to his mother, "I should like to see your mother and your father." And he began to cry, making his mother feel homesick. When the son saw that his wife felt downcast, and that his son was longing to see his grandparents, he said, "You may return to the earth to see your parents. Descend along my eyelashes." His eyelashes were the rays of the sun, which he extended down to his wife's home, where they lived with the woman's parents. The boy was playing with the children of the village, who were teasing him, saying that he had no father. He began to cry and went to his mother, whom he asked for bow and arrows. His mother gave him what he requested. He went outside and began to shoot his arrows towards the sky. The FRSD arrow struck the sky and stuck in it. The second arrow hit the notch of the FRSD one, and thus he continued until a chain was formed, extending from the sky down to the place where he was standing. Then he ascended the chain. He found the house of the sun, which he entered. He told his father that the boys had been teasing him, and he asked him to let him carry the sun. But his father said, "You cannot do it. I carry many torches. Early in the morning and late in the evening I burn small torches, but at noon I burn the large ones." The boy insisted on his request. Then his father gave him the torches, warning him at the same time to observe carefully the instructions that he was giving him in regard to their use. Early the next morning, the young man started on the course of the sun, carrying the torches. Soon he grew impatient and lighted all the torches at once. Then it grew very hot. The star. A number of Indian names have been omitted from this passage. They do not affect the meaning. Trees began to burn, and many animals jumped into the water to save themselves. But the water began to boil. Then his mother covered the people with her blanket, and thus saved them. The animals hid under stones. The ermine crept into a hole, which, however, was not quite large enough, so that the tip of its tail protruded from the entrance. It was scorched, and since that time the tip of the ermine's tail has been black. The mountain goat hid in a cave, hence its skin is perfectly white. All the animals that did not hide were scorched, and therefore have black skins, but the skin on their lower side remained lighter. When the son saw what was happening, he said to his son, "Why do you do so? Do you think it is good that there are no people on the earth?" The son took him and cast him down from the heavens, saying, "You shall be the mink, and future generations of man shall hunt you." 17. The Man in the Moon Lillooet. Teit, Journal of American Folklore, 25. No. The three frog sisters had a house in a swamp where they lived together. Not very far away lived a number of people in another house. Among them were Snake and Beaver, who were friends. They were well-grown lads and wished to marry the frog girls. One night Snake went to Frog's house and, crawling up to one of the sisters, put his hand on her face. She awoke and asked him who he was. Learning that he was Snake, she said she would not marry him and told him to leave at once. She called him hard names such as slimy fellow, smallies, etc. Snake returned and told his friend of his failure. Next night Beaver went to try, and, crawling up to one of the sisters, he put his hand on her face. She awoke, and finding out who he was, she told him to be gone. She called him names such as short legs, big belly, big buttocks. Beaver felt hurt, and, going home, began to cry. His father asked him what the matter was, and the boy told him. He said, "That is nothing. Don't cry. It will rain too much." But young Beaver said, "I will cry." As he continued to cry, much rain fell, and soon the swamp where the frogs lived was food. Their house was under the water, which covered the tops of the tall swamp grass. The frogs got cold and went to Beaver's house and said to him, "We wish to marry your sons." But old Beaver said, "No, you called us hard names." The water was now running in a regular stream. So the frogs swam away downstream until they reached a whirlpool, which sucked them in, and they descended to the house of the moon. The latter invited them to warm themselves at the FRE, but they said, "No, we do not wish to sit by the FRE. We wish to sit there," pointing at him. He said, "Here," at the same time pointing at his feet. They said, "No, not there." Then he pointed to one part of his body after another, until he reached his brow. When he said, "Will you sit here?" they all cried out, "Yes," and jumped on his face, thus spoiling his beauty. The frog sisters may be seen on the moon's face at the present day. 18. Origin of the Pleiades Onondaga. Beecham, Journal of American Folklore, 13. A long time ago, a party of Indians went through the woods toward a good hunting ground, which they had long known. They traveled several days through a very wild country, going on leisurely and camping by the way. At last they reached Cañutillo, the beautiful lake, where the gray rocks were crowned with great forest trees. Fish swarmed in the waters, and at every jutting point the deer came down from the hills around to bathe or drink of the lake. On the hills and in the valleys were huge beech and chestnut trees, where squirrels chattered, and bears came to take their morning and evening meals. The chief of the band was Hayano, tracks in the water, and he halted his party on the lakeshore that he might return thanks to the Great Spirit for their safe arrival at this good hunting ground. Here will we build our lodges for the winter, and may the Great Spirit, who has prospered us on our way, send us plenty of game and health and peace. The Indian is always thankful. The pleasant autumn days passed on. The lodges had been built, and hunting had prospered when the children took a fancy to dance for their own amusement. They were getting lonesome, having little to do, and so they met daily in a quiet spot by the lake to have what they called their jolly dance. They had done this a long time when one day a very old man came to them. They had seen no one like him before. He was dressed in white feathers, and his white hair shone like silver. If his appearance was strange, his words were unpleasant as well. He told them they must stop their dancing, or evil would happen to them. Little did the children heed, for they were intent on their sport. And again the old man appeared, repeating his warning. All the enjoyment. The mere dances did not afford all the enjoyment the children wished, and a little boy, who liked a good dinner, suggested a feast the next time they met. The food must come from their parents, and all these were asked when they returned home. "You will waste and spoil good victuals," said one. "You can eat at home as you should," said another, and so they got nothing at all. Sorry as they were for this, they met and danced as before. A little to eat after each dance would have made them happy indeed. Empty stomachs caused no joy. One day, as they danced, they found themselves rising little by little into the air, their heads being light through hunger. How this happened they did not know, but one said, "Do not look back, for something strange is taking place." A woman, too, saw them rise and called them back, but with no effect, for they still rose slowly above the earth. She ran to the camp, and all rushed out with food of every kind, but the children would not return, though their parents called piteously after them. But one would even look back, and he became a falling star. The others reached the sky, and are now what we call the Pleiades and the Onondagas Quata. Every falling or shooting star recalls the story, but the 7 stars shine on continuously, a pretty band of dancing children. 19. The Bag of Winds. Thompson, Teit, Memoirs of the American Folklore Society, 6. No. Long ago the wind did much damage, blowing violently over the country of the Indian. Moreover, it often killed many people and destroyed much property. At that time there was a man who lived near Spence's Bridge, and who had 3 sons. The youngest was very ambitious and fond of trying to do wonderful things. One day he said to his father and brothers, "I will snare the wind." But they laughed at him, saying, "How can you do that? The wind is unseen." However, he went out and set a snare. He did not succeed for several nights, as his noose was too large. He made it smaller every night, and on visiting his snare one morning, found he had caught the wind. After great difficulty, he succeeded at last in getting it into his blanket, and made for home with it, where he put it down. He told his people that he had at last captured the wind. They laughed at him. Then, to verify his statements, he opened one corner of the blanket, and immediately it began to blow fiercely in the lodge. Itself was almost blown over. The people cried to him to stay the force of the wind, which he did by again tying up the corner of the blanket. At last he released the wind on the condition that he would never blow strongly enough to hurt people in the Indian country again, which promise he has kept. XX, the bird whose wings made the wind Micmac. Rand, Legends of the Micmacs. No. An Indian family resided on the seashore. They had 2 sons, the oldest of whom was married and had a family of small children. They lived principally by fishing, and their favorite food was eels. Now it came to pass at a certain time that the weather was so stormy they could not FSH. The wind blew firstly night and day, and they were greatly reduced by hunger. Finally the old father told his boys to walk along the shore, and perhaps they might find a FSH that had flowed to shore, as sometimes happened. So one of the young men started off to try his luck in this line. When he reached a point where the wind blew so fiercely that he could hardly stand against it, he saw the cause of all the trouble. At the end of the point, there was a ledge of rocks, called Rocky Point, extending far out. At low water, the rocks were separated from one another by the shallow water, but were nearly all covered when the tide was in. On the farthest rock, a large bird, the Storm King, was standing, flapping his wings and causing all the trouble by the wind he raised. The Indian planned to outwit him. He called to the big bird, and addressing him as my grandfather, said, "Are you cold?" He answered, "No." The man replied, "You are cold. Let me carry you ashore on my back." "Do so," was the answer. So the man waded over to the rock on which the bird was sitting, took him on his back, and carefully carried him from rock to rock, wading over the intervening spaces of shoal water. In going down the last rock, he stumbled on purpose, but pretended that it was an accident, and the poor old bird fell and broke one of his wings. The man seemed very sorry, and immediately proceeded to set the bone and bind up the wing. He then directed the old fellow to keep quiet and not move his wings until the wounded one healed. He now inquired if it pained him much, and was told that it did not. "Remain there, and I will visit you again soon, and bring you some food." He now returned home, and found that the wind had all died away. There was a dead calm, so that before long they were supplied with a great abundance of food, as the eels were plenty and easily taken. But there can be too much even of a good thing. Calm weather continued for a succession of days, causing the salt water to be covered with a sort of scum. The Indians say it is the result of sickness and vomiting among the larger FSH. This scum prevents the fishermen from seeing into the water, and consequently is adverse to eel spearing. This took place on the occasion referred to, and so they sought for a remedy. The big bird was visited and his wing examined. It was sufficiently recovered to admit of motion, and he was told to keep both his wings going, but that the motion must be steady and gentle. This produced the desired effect. xxxii, the release of the WLD Animals Comanche, St. Clair, Journal of American Folklore, 22, no. Long ago, two persons owned all the buffalo. They were an old woman and her young cousin. They kept them penned up in the mountains so that they could not get out. Coyote came to these people. He summoned the Indians to a council. "That old woman will not give us anything. When we come over there, we will plan how to release the buffalo." They all moved near the buffalo enclosure. "After 4 nights," said Coyote, "we will again hold a council as to how we can release the buffalo. A very small animal shall go where the old woman draws her water. When the child gets water, it will take it home for a pet. The old woman will object, but the child will think so much of the animal that it will begin to cry and will be allowed to keep it. The animal will run off at daybreak, and the buffalo will burst out of their pen and run away. The FRST animal they sent failed. Then they sent the killdee. When the boy went for water, he found the killdee and took it home. 'Look here,' he said to his cousin, 'this animal of mine is very good.' The old woman replied, 'Oh, it is good for nothing. There is nothing living on the earth that is not a rascal or schemer.' The child paid no attention to her. 'Take it back where you got it,' said the woman. He obeyed. The killdee returned. The people had another council. 'Well, she has got the better of these two. They have failed,' said Coyote, 'but that makes no difference. Perhaps we may release them. Perhaps we shall fail. This is the 3rd time now. We will send a small animal over there. If the old woman agrees to take it, it will liberate those buffalo. It is a great schemer.' So they sent the 3rd animal. Coyote said, 'If she rejects this one, we shall surely be unable to liberate the game.' The animal went to the spring and was picked up by the boy, who took a great liking to it. 'Look here, what a nice pet I have.' The old woman replied, 'Oh, how foolish you are. It is a good for nothing. All the animals in the world are schemers. I'll kill it with a club.' The boy took it in his arms and ran away crying. He thought too much of his pet. 'No, this animal is too small,' he cried. When the animal had not returned by nightfall, Coyote went among the people, saying, "Well, this animal has not returned yet. I dare say the old woman has consented to keep it. Don't be uneasy. Our buffalo will be freed." Then he bade all the people get ready just at daybreak. "Our buffalo will be released. Do all of you mount your horses." In the meantime, the animal, following its instructions, slipped over to the pen and began to howl. The buffalo heard it and were terror-fed. They ran towards the gate, broke it down, and escaped. The old woman, hearing the noise, Woki the child asked, "Where is my pet?" He did not offend it. The old woman said, "I told you so. Now you see the animal is bad. It has deprived us of our game." She vainly tried to hold the buffalo back. At daybreak, all the Indians got on their horses, for they had confidence in Coyote. Thus the buffalo came to live on this earth. Coyote was a great schemer. XXI, the impounded water malacete. Spec, Journal of American Folklore, XXX, no. Aglabum kept back all the water in the world, so that rivers stopped fouling, and lakes dried up, and the people everywhere began dying of thirst. As a last resort, they sent a messenger to him to ask him to give the people water, but he refused and gave the messenger only a drink from the water in which he washed. But this was not enough to satisfy even the thirst of one. Then the people began complaining, some saying, "I'm as dry as a FSH, I'm as dry as a frog, I'm as dry as a turtle, I'm as dry as a beaver," and the like, as they were on the verge of dying of thirst. At last a great man was sent to Aglabum to beg him to release the water for the people. Aglabum refused, saying that he needed it himself to lie in. Then the messenger felled a tree, so that it fell on top of the monster and killed him. The body of this tree became the main river, St. John's River, and the branches became the tributary branches of the river, while the leaves became the ponds at the heads of these streams. As the waters fouled down to the villages of the people again, they plunged in to drink, and became transformed into the animals to which they had likened themselves when formerly complaining of their thirst. xxxii, The Origin of Corn Ababnaki. Brown, Journal of American Folklore 3, a long time ago, when Indians were FRST made, there lived one alone, far, far from any others. He knew not of FRE, and subsisted on roots, barks, and nuts. This Indian became very lonesome for company. He grew tired of digging roots, lost his appetite, and for several days lay dreaming in the sunshine. When he awoke, he saw something standing near, at which, at FRSD, he was very much frightened. But when it spoke, his heart was glad, for it was a beautiful woman with long light hair, very unlike any Indian. He asked her to come to him, but she would not, and if he tried to approach her, she seemed to go farther away. He sang to her of his loneliness and besought her not to leave him. At last she told him, if he would do just as she should say, he would always have her with him. He promised that he would. She led him to where there was some very dry grass, told him to get 2 very dry sticks, rub them together quickly, holding them in the grass. Soon a spark flew out. The grass caught it, and quick as an arrow the ground was burned over. Then she said, "When the sun sets, take me by the hair and drag me over the burned ground." He did not like to do this, but she told him that wherever he dragged her, something like grass would spring up, and he would see her hair coming from between the leaves. Then the seeds would be ready for his use. He did as she said, and to this day, when they see the silk hair on the cornstalk, the Indians know she has not forgotten them.